Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington. We're glad you're here today. We are a congregation that welcomes all people, people of all backgrounds, races, genders, sexual orientations, disabilities, and abilities, both seen and unseen. At UUCA, we encourage people to come for community, find inspiration, and live with purpose together. My name is Rachel Burnett, and I'm a member of your board of trustees. Whether this is your first time worshiping with us this morning or you've been coming to UUCA for many years, we're glad that you're here. Today's sermon by our guest minister, Reverend Halliday Kwan, is about honoring our ancestors. Last fall, I took a deep dive into learning more about my ancestors and did some pretty exhaustive searches on Ancestry.com. It was really fascinating to learn about multiple ancestors, mostly farmers, who lived, worked, and are buried in Greene County, Arkansas, and other places like Stark County, Ohio, and then to trace from those family lines back 6, 7, or even more generations to immigrants from Germany and the UK. Unlike many people, I'm now lucky enough to know these ancestors' names and many of their birth and death dates and places. But my search left me wondering more about who these people really were, and what it means about who I am. And what about those people who I count as spiritual ancestors, but with whom I share no blood at all? So on a personal note, I'm really looking forward to hearing more from Reverend Halliday Kwan about how to make sense of who our ancestors are and what this means in our lives today. I also want to mention the UUCA services auction, which is coming up right here at the church on November 18th. This is our first services auction since the pandemic, and it's a major fundraiser and also an opportunity to meet and connect with other church members. The folks organizing this event are looking for creative and interesting offerings to include in the auction catalog. So maybe you would consider offering, for example, a few hours of babysitting, or speaking of ancestors, you can auction off your great-grandmother's favorite apple cake. Or if you have a second home, you can offer for a weekend. Other ideas are perhaps auctioning off a specific skill like fixing porch screens, playing the piano, or doing a garden plan that another person would be excited to bid on. I encourage you to stop by the services auction table in the fellowship hall after the service to learn more. Also in the fellowship hall after the service today, you can receive a flu and or a COVID shot if you're interested in getting another vaccine. And last but not least, there's an opportunity to meet the ministers after the service it's in the boardroom, correct?
Welcome room.
In the welcome room. All the way down the hall. If you go out the sanctuary and go all the way down the hall, they'll be there right after the service. So thank you very much.
Rachel, thank you so much for that welcome and for sharing a little about your own ancestry work. It is good to be together, friends. I'm Reverend Amanda Poppy. My pronouns are she, her, and I am honored to serve this congregation as senior minister. And I want to just introduce you to the team of folks that are creating worship today. You have already heard beautiful music from Polymnia, our advanced handbell ensemble. There's also a beginner handbell ensemble, aptly named Crescendo, which I encourage you to check out. And they are led by our handbells director, Ken Bissell, uses he, him pronouns. Woo-woo! Jeff and Topher, you'll hear from later in the service. They use he, him pronouns and are part of our house band. And then in the back, Wesley and Cameron are on our AV team and making sure that we can be heard and seen. Hello to everyone at home. And finally, it is a great honor and joy for me to have my friend and colleague, Reverend Sherry Halliday Kwan, whose pronouns are she and they, with us from the First Unitarian Church of Rochester, New York, where they serve as lead minister. And You all are helping us to create worship this morning just by being here and building community. So I want to invite you now to turn to each other in this moment, say hello, especially to someone who you don't know yet. Well, good morning. I know you. How's it going? How's everybody feeling?
I make that same mistake at my own church every Sunday. I thought I got it down here in Virginia. I don't. Well, so come into this place where we have second chances. Come into this place of concrete and light. Come into this hour and space set aside to be together, to be joyful, to be brokenhearted, to be still. Settle into this time. Take your seat at this table set for you. Ours is a faith that calls us to presence. Ours is a time that we have been invited to bring our full hearts to. Come into this space made sacred by the tears and laughter of all those who have come before us. Come, let us worship, let us pay attention. Let us sing and cry. Let us be here together. Come, let us worship.
Each week here at UUCA, we light a candle of compassion in solidarity with those experiencing grief, violence, loneliness around the world or in our own lives. This week, our hearts are broken. They are broken for the people of Afghanistan, for the lives lost and the homes destroyed after the earthquake. And they are surely broken for the people of Palestine and of Israel, for the violence of the last weeks, unimaginable even as it unfolds, and for the violence of decades. We hold in our hearts all that is broken, all that is painful, and we do not turn away. We also join with our sibling Unitarian Universalist congregations around the world in lighting a chalice each Sunday. I invite you to join me in the chalice lighting words, which are printed in your order of service. We gather together as a community of memory and hope to celebrate life and its infinite possibilities for love. We light this chalice as a symbol of the light within every human heart. May our individual sparks meet and merge, bringing both light and warmth to the world. Friends, will you now join me in rising in body or in spirit to sing hymn number 23? It's in your gray hymnal. We are going to sing verses 1, verse 4, verse 5, and verse 6. 1, 4, 5, 6. We can do it. Take it away, Topher.
Bring many names, beautiful and good. Celebrate the parable and story, holiness in glory, living, loving God. Hail and Hosanna, bring many names. Old aching God, gray with endless care, calmly piercing evil's new disguises, glad of new surprises, wiser than despair. Hail and Hosanna, old aching God, young growing God, eager still to know, willing to be changed by what you've started, quick to be delighted, singing as you go. Hail and Hosanna, young growing God, great living God, never fully known, joyful darkness far beyond our seeing, closer yet than breathing, everlasting home. Hail and Hosanna, great living God.
I would like to invite the younger or smaller among us to come forward and join me on the chancel. If you would like, you can bring your grown-ups. You can come on your own. Either way is great. You can stay in your pew if you'd rather. But I'm glad I have some friends with me. Reverend Sherry, who is visiting, is going to tell us a story this morning. So come on up. Please bring your bunnies by all means. Let's sit down and see what Reverend Sherry has to say.
Well, thank you, Reverend Amanda, for the invitation, and I'm glad to be sitting up here with all of you because I'm not smaller, but I am younger than Reverend Amanda, so it's a delight.
wow. Well, Reverend Sherry, that's really,
And I'm so
you
glad
just
to
really
be
went
with all
there.
of you. So it is just such a joy. And well, I just want to tell you a little bit about my family. So I grew up in a place with lots of trees and sun. It looked, quite frankly, a lot like what I can see out the windows right now. And I had lots of aunts and uncles and family members who would take me on picnics. And I loved going on these picnics because before we would do this, we would go to the store and we would get to pick my favorite thing to drink and my favorite thing to eat. So, do any of you have a favorite thing to drink or eat that you could tell me about that we might want to bring on this picnic? I see you over there. Juice. I love juice. Celery. That is a bold choice. I like it. What? Lemonade. I love lemonade, and that's a great. That's going to come into this story later. So, apples. Apples are great. Yeah. Yes. Cookies. These are all delightful choices, and I love all of them. And actually, though I loved this practice, this thing that we would do where we'd go and get my favorite thing, it was really hard for me because I had a hard time choosing. I always wanted more than one thing. And that's okay. I always got one thing I like to drink, one thing I like to eat, and we'd always get pork rinds. Do any of you know what pork rinds are? It doesn't really matter, but my guess is they're probably not your favorite thing because you don't know what they are. It turned out they were also not my favorite thing. But I didn't know that because we got them every time. And the whole task was getting something to eat and something to drink and going on this picnic with my aunts and my uncles and my family. And so we would do that, and we'd have a little picnic, and we'd take a can of Coca-Cola, and we'd pour some into the grass, and then I would get to drink half, and my uncle would get to drink half, and then we would eat things I liked and pork rinds. And then one day, a lemon fell out of a tree and hit me on the head. And I don't know if you all know stories like this, but I bet lots of you do, where when something falls out of the sky and hits you on the head, you have a flash of insight. That's exactly what happened in this story. The lemon came out of the tree, presumably the lemon tree that was right above my head, and it hit me in the head, and I said, I don't like pork rinds. Why do we get these every time? My uncle explained to me that even though pork rinds weren't his favorite either, we would get them because, well, this picnic, it would always happen at the graveyard, at the cemetery. It would happen at the grave of my great-great-grandfather, and he loved pork rinds. So we ate them. And my uncle said to me, it's okay if you don't like them, you don't have to eat them. We'll still bring them here, and I like them, so I'll eat them. And, well, I learned a couple of things that day. I learned that I don't have to eat pork rinds, though they're very popular now, if any of you didn't know that. Again, maybe. But I also, when that lemon came and hit me on the head, my uncle said to me, you know, it's okay if you don't like pork rinds, but the reason we bring them here is because we also didn't plant this lemon tree, but we both love lemonade. That the lemons and the tree were provided to us by people who did something before they could even imagine that we would be here. And so this lemon tree, it gave me the gift of never having to eat a pork rind ever again. And it helped me realize that trees and family and people often give gifts that they don't understand or know to people like me or you before we are even around. So, thank you all so much for coming up here. Thank you for having a place for me to sit with my elder, Reverend Amanda. Unbelievable. And thanks for spending some time with me.
That's enough from Reverend Sherry. We are going to sing our children to their classes. I invite you to join in singing as they make their way, and Topher leads us. Thank you, Reverend Sherry.
Peace to you on your way. May you grow in love each day, meeting new friends and opening your mind to the wonders of the world you will find. To the wonders of the world you will find.
As our children make their way to their classes, the sanctuary becomes a little quieter and just slightly less wiggly. And so I invite you into a time of centering our bodies in the space, centering our minds and our hearts. Perhaps like me, your heart has been indeed broken these last weeks as we have seen violence unfolding before us. Reverend Dr. Sophia Betancourt, the president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, has invited us these weeks to remember our common humanity, even when it may seem the world has forgotten. And so I invite you during our time of meditation to imagine that humanity as tangibly as you can. Settle into your seat. Close your eyes if that feels comfortable, or soften your gaze. Take a breath with me, if you will. Feel your feet on the floor, your body in the pew, yourself here. Breathe in here. And now imagine a thread connecting your heart to mine. A silver thread barely visible, one heart to another. Imagine a thread from your heart to the person next to you and the person behind you, to every person in this sanctuary. A net of silver threads. Imagine the threads going further, a thread from your heart downstairs to every one of our children, a thread to the hearts of their teachers. Imagine a silver thread barely visible that crosses Arlington Boulevard and George Mason Drive, that reaches out to the heart of someone you have not met and perhaps never will, driving on their way this morning. Imagine a silver thread that crosses the country to the heart of your beloveds in another state or around the world, to all those for whom you worry and weep. Imagine a net of silver threads, heart to heart. Spirit of life and love, God of many names and beyond our naming, remind us of the net of silver threads. Remind us that we create it each day, and that on the days when we are brokenhearted, the net remains to catch us. May it be so. Amen.
Fuente de amor, ven hacia mí y al corazón cántale tu compasión. Sopla al volar, sube en la mar, hasta moldear la justicia de la vida. Arraigame, libérame, fuente de amor, ven a mí, ven a mí. Spirit of life, come unto me. giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Thank you, Polymnia, for ringing us in to that hymn this morning. Here at UUCA, we share 70% of all that is collected on a Sunday morning with an organization whose values resonate with our own, doing work in the world beyond our walls, often in Arlington or in Virginia or even further afield. This week, this month, we share with Eco Action Arlington. You can read more about Eco Action Arlington in your order of service. It educates, advocates, and acts to create a sustainable community by improving our natural environment, encouraging environmentally friendly behaviors, ensuring environmental justice, and addressing the climate crisis. And we're so grateful Eco Action Arlington has been here and brought their staff and volunteers to be with us each Sunday, so you can visit them in the fellowship hall after service. We are also lucky to be not just partners in Eco Action's work, but also recipients of their work. They actually brought in some trees and bushes around our campus to add to the green that we offer, and we are grateful for that. I invite you, therefore, to give generously to their work and to the ongoing work of the congregation. You can do so using the handy QR code on the back or with check, or as Rev CTC would say, were she here and not on sabbatical, yay, Rev CTC, cold hard cash. I also want to invite you to know that our Sunday ambassadors, that include our welcome team and our ushers, are always looking for more to join them. It's a wonderful way to participate in the congregation and a needed way. And so I think there is a sign-up sheet that you are invited to put your name on if you'd like to be part of that ministry after service. For now, however, we receive your gifts and gifts of music. As the ushers bring the offering forward, I invite you to join me in the blessing, which you'll find in your order of service. We bless and receive these gifts, opening our hearts to true generosity. Let us be grateful when we give, be it time, talent, or treasure. Let us be grateful for our needs and the experience of vulnerability. Let us be grateful for those who share their gifts to nurture this congregation. Thank you. Our reading this morning comes from a nonfiction book called Kindred about the lives of Neanderthals. It describes a scene that could have happened thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. And because it describes a scene after the death of an infant, it could be one that holds fresh pain. I offer that context as I share the reading. Dawns rise high over the cliffs, and green tinges the branches where her people feel the urge to move again. The furred who live nearby have grown wary, leave no prints to follow. The tiny body that she had birthed had died, yet still she carried it. Now the group gathers things to leave, and she feels the pull to join them. But putting down her burden is frightening. Inhaling her infant's heady birth smell, still caught in its dark hair, she crouches at the shelter edge. The clutched bundle is lowered to the ground, and for the first time lies apart from her body. The others approach curiously, reach out to know. Beasts will come later, and this precious thing must be protected. She scoops a hollow, slides the already dusty form down, covers it. Embraced by the soft dirt full of their stony leavings, she draws back and joins the people to walk on. Skies flicker as the days, years, centuries pass. Soils condense and hold the delicate bones tight. Others come and go above, but eventually the vibrations of footfalls stop. Even icy tendrils from heart-aching cold cannot penetrate to the tiny skeleton. Tens of thousands more winters, then deep thumpings murmur downwards. The weight lessens. Voices come. New people are building a house where none have lived for so long. Patten-shod feet clatter up and down wooden stairs over the small remains, a lullaby of life after death. In a blink, the house too is gone. Then sediments shiver and shift as hands pull at the dirt. Clods crumble, and a chink of early summer sunlight grazes the white shatter of eggshell-thin skull. A voice shouts out, "Arrête! L'eau!" Rough yet gentle hands, like those that last touched this lonely little one, reach down after so long to pick it up. Here ends our reading today, which comes from the nonfiction book Kindred, Neanderthal Life, Love, Death, and Art by archaeologist Rebecca Ragg Sykes.
Rough yet gentle hands. May we all be held in a palm of love like that. So I'm grateful to you all for your welcome today. I bring greetings from the people of Rochester, New York, and the congregation that I serve there. It's always a joy to be able to visit other Unitarian Universalist congregations, to be able to spend time with people in this same tapestry of faith, but who do things differently, who are actually different people, who have different buildings and ways of doing things. And yet, I was especially excited about being with all of you today, not because of difference, but because of similarity. Our churches get confused all the time on the internet. In this direction, specifically, they look the same in pictures. And so the two of us are constantly having experiences where our colleagues or each other are wondering what the heck we're doing at the other person's place. So it feels sort of like meeting my doppelganger in space. And it is so good to be with all of you. I will admit, though, that the similarities that we share, I found a little challenging when I first arrived in Rochester. Concrete is not intuitively warm. And so the beautiful building in the community that I love and admire and feel so grateful and humbled to be able to be a part of had a building that, quite frankly, I found I needed a little more support in. I was nervous that very first time I led worship there. And, well, I drew upon the strength and the courage and the hope that I was well grounded in. I'm an atheist on most days, and a deep and reverent believer in God every other Tuesday or thereabouts. But where I have questions about an eternal soul, I feel very clear that I have feet. And so I put a little bit of hope in the sole of my shoe. I made a list of all of the people who had supported me in ministry, knowing that I would forget 90% of them. And more than forget, I would not know many of them. That the people who poured love and nourishment into the congregations that I had served previously, all of the people who made what we do together possible, I wouldn't necessarily know, but I would do my best. And I filled up a page of names of all the people who had loved me into being, who were cheering me on in that moment. And I folded up this piece of paper and I put it on my foot, and I was nervous, so I sweat, and it inked itself onto the bottom of my foot like any good tattoo. It was evidence of a love that went deeper than artistry, even. This practice, well, it's not surprising or new to me because I had a childhood where tracing the lineage of where I came from and whose gifts and mistakes I was now benefiting from. For example, perhaps I'm too close to the speakers here. Hear a little bit of feedback there. That practice of tracing lineages, of tracing the people who made what I am doing possible, is something that I had been practicing my whole life. My family from China practices a type of ancestor veneration. We don't use that word, but unequivocally, that is what it is called. And feeding, sometimes literally, a connection with the people who came before us is understood to be, well, something we ought to do, should do, but more importantly, just do, and quite frankly, have fun doing. It includes snacks and Coca-Cola. It's not a burden, and it wasn't as a child, and it still isn't as an adult. This act of calling forth ancestors, of finding hope and courage in those who came before me, well, it's something I've been practicing all my life. And yet, in Unitarian Universalist contexts, in my church, we call forward ancestors. We ask people to speak the names of those who have come before, those on our hearts and our minds, about once a month. always at our winter solstice, but fairly regularly. And just a little while ago, my wife, a lifelong Unitarian, someone raised in this faith who went to RE all her life, religious education, finally admitted after decades, not only of being in this faith, but of watching me do this, that she had no idea what we were doing when we were supposed to be calling forth ancestors. I get that I'm supposed to name someone who's dead, she said, but beyond that, why? And to what end? And who should I pick? I don't much like my grandparents, or I didn't when they were alive. And, well, I didn't really know them. But should I just say their names? Does it count? Unitarian Universalists, despite being people of great freedom, we can get caught up on, are we doing it right? And while we have great capacity for mystery and a generosity of spirit that knows that sometimes at church or in our congregations, something is for our neighbor. This song might not resonate with me, but someone else here likes it, and we create space for that. It did come as a surprise to me that my wife, after watching this happen hundreds of times, suddenly was compelled to figure out, should this have any spiritual meaning for her? Is this supposed to matter? Yes, it is supposed to matter. Now, it may not be a practice that speaks inherently to everyone, and it is a complicated practice. It is a practice that each of us, despite or regardless of what our ancestral and learned spiritual practices may be, it is a practice that each of us are invited full-heartedly into. Now, ancestor worship or paying attention to one's lineage, it arises in lots of different cultural and religious traditions. You find it not only in East Asian practices, but also on the African continent, also in the Jewish practice of placing pebbles on grave sites. And there are many more pebbles in the last week. This practice of naming those who have come before and honoring our ancestors, it emerges in lots of different ways. And yet, in Unitarian Universalism, it doesn't come from Chinese ancestor veneration. We draw directly from, and sorry, I can tell that I'm going in and out. And okay. All right. I really, we are a democratic people, and I love when I first started to fix it, at least a couple people were like, yes, fix that. And the rest of you are like, you're good. I'll take it. I appreciate that. We contain multitudes, collectively as well as individually. We draw from, specifically, a phrase written by the Apostle Paul in the letter to the Hebrews when we name a great cloud of witnesses. We draw from a tradition of knowing that those who have come before us hold some power. And yet, while the letter to the Hebrews names the power of this great cloud of witnesses, there are parts of the Bible too that say, don't do that. The Bible is, if nothing else, complicated, contradictory at times. And yet it begins very early on in Genesis with a naming, a litany of ancestors. So-and-so begot so-and-so, for an unseemingly long list. We are given a way of creating community and a sense of belonging for a displaced people who have moved from a land that means something to them. And so this creation of names becomes then a home. We find ourselves in a practice equally complicated in its attempt to pour meaning into our lives. Many of us find, because of histories of adoption or assimilation or enslavement or displacement, tracing lineages is a deeply complicated thing if DNA is the only thing that matters. Even those of us who have fallen down the rabbit hole of Ancestry.com or 23andMe quickly learned that DNA is a relatively small and straightforward part of a very complicated process. These ancestry services find that the ethical quandaries that emerge from tracing ancestors are many and complicated, and place us in positions where things that we think are straightforward rights or responsibilities often find themselves in contradiction with each other, often find themselves unable to hold one course of action, knowing that multiple things are true at the same time. DNA is not the end of the story when it comes to 23andMe or Ancestry.com, and DNA is not the end of the story when it comes to honoring our ancestors. We know that genealogies, like the Bible, are complicated. And within Unitarian Universalist practice, we create space and grace for nuance, for understanding our lineages with all the complexity that they hold. This means that when our family histories, our spiritual traditions, the people from whom we have emerged contain stories or have pasts that are unsavory, we know that we can't ghost on those ghosts and ignore them completely, that we must grapple with the truth of that tradition, but that also who we are and the web of connection that we are woven into is not merely determined by our DNA, that our ancestors too are not only those who came before us here in this congregation, who came before us in our broader faith, who came before us at the schools that we attended, or the Sunday education, or whatever religious education we grew up with. We know that our ancestors, those who created the containers that make who we are possible, are a complicated story. Even those who stick with the DNA find that even just to the great-great-grandfather level, the pork rinds and Coca-Cola level, you're already overwhelmed with numbers, that you find yourself at 5 generations with 32 people whose stories you're suddenly meant to track. And, well, you don't actually have to do the math there, you just have to do some discernment, some wise choosing of wrestling with those whose stories are hard, sometimes unlikable, sometimes violent, sometimes riddled with mistakes that you hope that you will not make, and learn a different path. And discernment, too, in selecting and choosing those who helped make what you value possible in your own life. Who and how we pay attention matters. Now, in Unitarian Universalism, we don't practice the kind of filial piety that I grew up with, that is Chinese custom that you find in Buddhism and Taoism and Confucianism, where your literal relatives are the people you honor, and traditionally, though increasingly not contemporarily, the relatives of your husband, if you are a woman married into another family, in a very patriarchal context. We know that in Unitarian Universalist spaces, we have the freedom and discernment and grace to bring additional nuance to what we pay attention to. Ancestor practice, ancestor reverence, ancestor relationship connects us to a web of connection and an experience of the divine that we are invited into. And so I'd like to ask you to call to mind an ancestor. It could be someone you are related to, but it could be someone, an intellectual or historical figure in Unitarian Universalism, or who had an impact in your life. It could be someone whose stories you don't yet know, but whose name has sparked some interest and that you'd like to get to know. And if you're like my wife, you're struggling to come up with someone right now. I'm going to give you a little more time. There's no perfect ancestor, just like there's no perfect person. Just pick one. Imagine yourself in a sunny, comfortable place with this person. Imagine sharing their favorite snack. You might not know what they like to eat. Imagine sharing your favorite snack then. Something refreshing and comforting. Imagine spending a little bit of time together. Just as genealogy is never just about DNA, our relationship with our ancestors can never be simply about facts and figures, but about relationship and practice. Our relationship with our ancestors grants us space and freedom for nuance and multitudes, but it demands too of us practice and return. Our relationship with our ancestors is one that we have considerable choice in, considerable ability to return again and again to. If we can't choose who our relatives are, if we can't choose the unsavory truths of our past lineages, we can choose how and why we pay attention and with whom we spend time with. We can choose how we take the mistakes and the possibilities and courage and hope dealt out before our time and find ourselves in new relationships. So I invite you into this space to call forward this great cloud of witnesses, to speak aloud the names on your heart and mind, and bring forward those people into this space. May we be surrounded by these ancestors. May this great cloud of witnesses speak possibility into our lives. May we find ourselves ever growing, ever unfolding, ever enjoying a new favorite snack. May we deepen those relationships that matter. And may we bring the wisdom of the past into our lives now. Amen. I invite you to rise in body, and if you can't stand, I invite you to rise in spirit, and if you can't rise in spirit, the rest of us got you.
In the Teal Hymnal 1003, Where Do We Come From? This will be a little bit of a choose-your-own-adventure approach. We will not be repeating any of the lines. We'll do each one once. We'll do the form 4 times. If you want to stay with a line, as you notice, each line sort of fits over every other one. So if you want to stay with one line the whole time, if you want to jump back and forth, Jeff and I will be following the form through 4 times, and I'll even count them off for you. So with that in mind, let's see what happens. Where do we come from? Where are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Miss a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? Where are we going?
Thank you so much, Topher and Jeff. I invite you to join me in our chalice extinguishing words found in your order of service. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light and warmth it represents. These we carry with us, bringing our sparks of love to the world.
May our ghosts, our ancestors, those we choose to be in relationship, and those whose stories are still unfolding in our hearts, may they be examples of courage in our own lives. And may our lives and the ways in which we choose to move, to grow, to learn, transform the world. Let us go in love, go in peace. Amen. got all my sisters with me. We
Get up, everybody, and sing. We are family. I got all my sisters with me. We are family. Get up, everybody, and sing.